If you ask any gamer about the most important element in a video game, they'll probably tell you that it's definitely the story. And if we're talking about which genre relies the most on the plot, most of us can probably agree that horror should come to mind first. Because in some cases, you don't need to see any ghost or even delve into a haunted house in order to get scared. A suspenseful, mysterious story can be enough to intimidate you and ruin your mood, because it makes your brain curious about certain events that can't be explained. And that's when fear starts to take over.
Annabelle, are you okay?
Welcome, Nathan.
No. Annabelle, please, don't do this. I came to help you,
But if you think that stories and horror titles are just meant to scare you, then you probably didn't play enough experiences, and you definitely don't understand the purpose of narrative designers. Because the main goal of certain horror games is not actually fright, but it's literally touching your emotions and breaking your heart in such a way that you'll start asking yourself if it's just a fictional scenario or a real-life tragedy that's being portrayed in the form of a video game. And that's why in today's video, I want to showcase 5 horror games that made us emotionally confused between being terrified and completely heartbroken.
Don't you remember what really happened? Don't try to hide the truth. You killed me.
Whitehaven is a psychological horror game that was released back in 2021. At the beginning of the game, you take on the role of Rachel, a young girl living in Whitehaven orphanage, and she's trying to investigate the place to find out what happened to her friend Claire, who got caught 2 days ago while attempting to escape the orphanage. Rachel is worried, and she's wondering why Claire hasn't come back to the room yet, so she figures out a way to take the keys from the closet secretly, and she decides to get out at night. But in order to break free from the institution, you must unravel the secrets that are hidden within. But the prologue ends in an unexpected and mysterious way. Just when the little girl found a ladder and she was close to escaping from a window, an unknown man caught her from behind. It's obvious that he's one of the staff or guards, but sadly, we didn't get to know what happened to the girl afterwards, or why she was trying hard to escape that place. After that segment of the game, the events shift forwards, and you will take on the role of another character. But this time, it's a female adult called Rose Davies, who used to work as a teacher at the infamous orphanage. She can't clearly remember her experience in the institution, but she states that she's been having dreams about it, and it caused her to suffer from anxiety and headaches. So she decides to visit the place at her therapist's request, because he thinks that confronting her fears might help her in getting over it.
My name is Rose Davies, and I used to work as a teacher at Whitehaven Orphanage. I feel like it's been a long time since then. I can barely remember what the place was like. Lately, I've been having dreams that evoke the orphanage, headaches, anxiety. My therapist, Dr. Tramis, has recommended that I visit the place. He says it might help me sort out my thoughts. Everything seems like a dream to me. Every day, every second. I feel like I'm lost in fog.
It appears that the orphanage got shut down for some reason, and Rose is trying to take a look at every part of the place in order to refresh her memory and remember what was happening, or to be precise, what was being hidden. As she moves through the rooms, memories keep flooding back, but they're not happy memories at all. Every corner of the orphanage represents a painful occurrence that happened in the past to the orphan children, from being beaten harshly to getting mentally mistreated by the psychiatrists. All the signs reminded Rose of the children's screams that she used to hear during her work there, but sadly, she never took it seriously at that time.
I remember the screams, the bruises. God, those poor children. We did all of this. I deserve all of this. It's my fault.
As you progress through the game, you'll realize that the helpless kids were basically being mistreated by everybody, and no one felt sorry for them or even had the concern to suspect anything and try to save them. Their only hope was one person, and that person was the protagonist Rose, but obviously she didn't succeed in putting an end to their misery. And that's exactly the sad truth that you will discover at the end of the game. Eventually, you'll realize that Rose actually figured out what was happening in the orphanage, and she tried to seek help during the months that she spent working there. But unfortunately, she couldn't tell anybody because she failed to escape the place, and she got caught by the watchmen in the forest nearby. And apparently she then lost her memory. Consequently, she couldn't spread the word, and after those memories came back to her mind in the present, she has to live with the guilt of failing those innocent kids, and she can't stop blaming herself. Many people who played the game would probably complain that the gameplay wasn't too good and the experience could be better. And to be honest, I can agree with them. But for me, the story was so deep, and it actually touched me because it relates to real life more than you think. And to be precise, I believe that the game was inspired by the American Tekakwitha orphanage, which was a place where orphans were subjected to all kinds of abuse and mistreatment during the time between the 1940s and 1970s. To an extent that one of the survivors stated that the place was pretty much like a horror movie, in which people walk together, but they don't communicate because of fear and the consequences they might face if they do anything wrong. You can search about the institution by yourself and know more horrific facts about it. And you can also read about similar places in the world, like the infamous Mazanovsky orphanage in Russia or the Ungarini home in Romania.
My name is Rose Davies, and I work as a teacher at Whitehaven Orphanage. I'm new here. I've only been working at the orphanage for a couple of months. However, it didn't take me long to realize that something was wrong. When I started, I was warned that these children might be troubled or need special treatment because of the things they had experienced. I'd worked with other children of all types before, and knew that the problem these children had was not in their past. My students brought marks and bruises practically every day. They were apathetic and reacted with fear to anything. One day I went to see Dr. Tramis, the doctor in charge of children's health here at Whitehaven. Shortly after speaking with him, my suspicions were confirmed. The children were being abused by the orphanage staff. Dr. Tramis would not name names and said it was best for everyone to keep it all quiet. I couldn't leave things like that. I couldn't. One night, I took the medical files from the infirmary to blow the lid off all this. The watchman must have heard me, and as soon as he saw me with the files, I ran. I left the orphanage and ran. I ran as fast as I could. The watchman was behind me. I couldn't stop to look at him, but I could hear his screams. I ran through the forest to try to lose him, but suddenly I felt a blow on my head and fell to the ground. My head had never hurt so much. I remember the trees pouring red as the blood poured down my face. The taste of iron being dragged through the forest as the branches of the pine trees dug into my legs. A red moon, a manhole cover. And now I'm here, abandoned, and here I will die. No one will ever read these words or know what happened in the orphanage. Everything is darkening, and the only thing I regret is that I couldn't save those poor children. It's my fault.
The main character of Silent Hill 2 is James Sunderland. At the start of the game, James remarks that his wife, Mary Shepard Sunderland, passed away 3 years prior. Despite this, he got a mysterious letter written in Mary's handwriting that said she was expecting him in their special place, located somewhere in Silent Hill. When James arrives in the town, he is involved in a series of strange and horrific experiences that make him question a lot of things in his life and past, including his mental state, moral code, recollections, and character.
Are you taping again? Come on. I don't know why, but I just love it here. It's so peaceful. You know what I heard? This whole area used to be a sacred place. I think I can see why. It's too bad we have to leave.
To be honest, it's not easy to describe James's personality. In the game, Maria states that he's a kind man, but Laura describes him as a quiet person with an enigmatic character who doesn't like to talk much. However, some of James' behaviors demonstrate a darker side. His lack of self-esteem and assurance became obvious when Mary became sick, and upon her death, he was overwhelmed by deep anguish and gloom. He is convinced that her illness caused her death and will not accept any responsibility for her demise, and would not allow anyone to make him feel that he was involved in any way. He kinda looks like a cowardly man escaping from guilt and avoiding blaming himself for any mistakes, or even neglect that he might have committed.
So there you are, James. Did you get the letter? Did you find Mary? If not, let's get going on it, okay?
Mary's gone. She's dead.
Liar, that's a lie!
No, that's not true.
She died because she was sick?
No. I killed her.
You killer! Why'd you do it? I hate you!
It kinda reminds me of a comment that we had on one of our previous videos on the channel. It says, "My hope for Silent Hill 2 Remake is that it will remind people that James killed his wife, not because she was suffering and he wanted to put her out of her misery, but because he was angry and selfish that she was mean to him as a result of her tumor, and that he had to take care of her." This comment pretty much summarized the sad story of Silent Hill 2, and honestly, It's one of the most complicated plots that we can come across in our gaming life. On one hand, a part of us feels sorry for James because he really seems hopeless and miserable all the time. He doesn't care about his life, and he even thinks about putting an end to it all the time. I don't know if he's actually a bad person who didn't care about his wife's life, or if things went out of hands, and now he can't deal with the pain of regret. The game literally forces you to deal with two situations that are both depressing. You have to think about the tragic death of the wife, and at the same time, you need to handle the collapsing mental state of her husband James, who's stuck between a sorrowful past and an unsettling present. You're basically witnessing one of the most disturbing scenarios that can happen to a married couple, especially when you realize that Mary was really in love with James and she saw him as her dream husband. But everything changed when her illness altered her character and started to cause her some anger issues, which resulted in a complete transformation in her attitude towards James. And obviously James was not the understanding husband that could handle a situation like that. And let's not forget that he also was suffering from a mental breakdown after the doctors told him that his wife's condition is hopeless, and that she only has 3 years to live.
In my restless dreams, I see that town. Silent Hill.
The common theory indicates that James ended his wife's life, and after that, he was planning to take his own when he arrives in Silent Hill Town. But I'm really curious to know your opinion of the whole story. Do you believe that James is a selfish husband that deserves the mental pain that he went through? Or is he a misunderstood person who just went through a peculiar cycle of events that he has no control over? Tell me what you think in the comments below.
Mary? Could she really be here? Waiting for me? Mary died of that damn disease 3 years ago.
我刚才请示过慈姑观音了。从这个盘来看，这个状况是一种因果业，所以你才会遇到这种事情。你放心，慈姑观音非常灵验，你只要拿出诚心，所求之事一定可以达成。你想清楚了哦。那我们现在就去慈姑观音面前发愿。
This game does not have any of the typical horror components, such as zombies or monsters. Devotion uses the ordinary and turns it into something sinister, that even the simplest of hallways can become paths filled with dread when woven together. And each area has its own terrible experience. I don't worry about what might be waiting behind the next door or corner, since jump scares are not very common here. Instead, the fear comes from the thought of what will happen to me if I continue to traverse the corridor with its bloody walls, or if the protagonist is going to lose his mind at any second and start seeing flashbacks of sad memories of his family. The story is set during the 1980s, and it's about 3 family members. You will play as the father Du Fengyu, who's trying to make it as a screenwriter, and the wife is a former singer and movie actress called Li Feng. but the tragedy pretty much centers around the daughter Mai Shin, who's suffering from illness and trying hard to follow her mother's footsteps to become a singer. The game is mainly centered around the 5 chambers of their humble home, and its narrative guides the player on a heart-rending journey through the years and the various forms of this close-knit area. Everything about the environment will make you feel that there are no happy events here, and the family's struggle will gradually start reaching your mind in a way that transforms the game from a horror title to a documentary about a sad tragedy, and you're witnessing it in real time. The thing that makes the experience more mentally disturbing is that you will witness events that occurred in the past, which means that the tragedy already happened, and you can do nothing to prevent it or try to change the course of things. The majority of the story is conveyed through an abundance of objects you collect, analyze, and interact with as you journey through different versions of the family home. And all of this takes place in different timelines, and specifically during the years 1980, 1985, and 1986. There's no mission here, nor a task that you need to achieve in order to get a happy outcome in the end. You're basically reliving the sad moments of the place and the problems of this heartbreaking family.
爸爸，你看我，爸爸，你看我啦！
We all know that dolls are one of the creepiest elements in any horror game. In fact, they're scary even in real life too, but the dolls in Devotion are a completely different thing. The first time I encountered them, I felt confused and unsettled at the same time. Not because they're frightening, but mainly because they seem that they're trying to tell me something, or to be accurate, they were actually representing real movements and the daily actions of the family members when their life was normal. You'll see a male doll and a female one watching TV in a casual way, and they clearly represent the husband and wife. Then you'll see the husband sitting at his desk, and he's obviously practicing his job as a writer, with his wife by his side as if she's encouraging him. After that, you'll go to the kitchen and see the wife there doing the dishes normally, but just when I thought that the scenes couldn't get any more bizarre, my heart nearly skipped a beat when the doll started moving and staring at me in one of the most disturbing manners I've ever experienced in a horror game. But as I said earlier, the most depressing part of the plot is not about the married couple, but it's actually about their ill daughter Mai Shin, who's obviously struggling to pursue her dream of achieving a career like her mom's. As a dad, you'll go through your daughter's pain and watch her misery in multiple sections of the game. Reading the notes will also make things worse for you, because apparently there's nothing happy to read, and there's only tragic events to discover. Even the television is not as cheerful as it seems, because it's actually broadcasting a singing competition in which Mai Shin participates, but she sadly loses. Everything around you indicates that you're in this game to break your heart, and not to get scared in the traditional way. And the Asian background of the atmosphere also intensifies the impact of the events. I think it's safe to say that Asian folklore in general is one of the most chilling themes you can experience in a horror title, because it combines several real-life cultural aspects with the fictional story to get you attached to the plot and make you wonder if these occurrences are imaginary or they were inspired by real people and true stories.
们卫冕者的分数是84、85、86、87、87、88、88、86、89分。
好的，那我们挑战者所得到的分数是84、85、86、87、88、88，再来88，再来88，还有没有再来一分88，再来一分88。好的，那么
妈妈什么时候会回来？妈妈去哪里？我真的好想妈妈哦。
Volterra, 12th March 1938. Renee T., 16 years old, admitted for observation yesterday morning from Pontedera, accompanied by a police officer authorised by the examining magistrate of the Court of Pisa to be admitted for psychiatric evaluation. Medical certificate. Mental illness preceded by warning signs. Has suffered from depression for a year, believing she had tuberculosis. Food deprivation.
Anyone who knows this game can understand that it's not possible to make a list of the saddest stories in horror titles without putting it at number 1. I mean, the main purpose of this game in the first place is literally to make you feel sad, because that's exactly what the plot is all about. You play as Renee, a young girl who her life changed completely on March 12, 1938, the day when she was forced to stay in a psychiatric hospital in order to be treated for her mental disorder. But the asylum we're talking about here is not a regular one, and to be accurate, the place that the game centers around contains everything except treatment. The infamous clinic in question is the Ospedale Psichiatrico di Volterra, or simply the Volterra Asylum. And it's a real Italian mental institution that was founded in 1888, and its reputation is only based on its horrific and cruel treatment of patients, and how it became a nightmare for anyone that enters its frightening doors.
My name is Renee. I was a shy girl, and I just wanted to be like the others. But that's not what happened.
Situated in the middle of the town of Volterra, there is a hill with 4 buildings that formerly served as a mental hospital. The windows are smashed, and the external walls are decorated with graffiti. Inside there are still some items left since the shutdown of the establishment in 1978, such as wheelchairs, a classic phone booth, and sunbeds. Each item represents a sad memory, a tragic moment, and a painful incident that happened to the people who were allegedly being treated there. That's pretty much the whole purpose of the Town of Light, because in the game you'll walk through the rooms and passageways of the abandoned asylum, and each area will trigger the memory of the protagonist to remember the worst occurrences that she encountered during her stay as a patient there.
I
was 16, and I was scared. I was always scared. They told me that they would bring me to a place where the fear would fade away. That is where I stopped living. I've tried to explain what was happening to me. I was tied to my bed for days and days, abandoned to my nightmares, silenced only by an injection. My fear was no longer fear. It was madness.
What makes the experience even more depressing is the fact that the events of the game were actually inspired by the letters and diary of a real woman that was admitted into the Volterra Asylum in the 1930s. Knowing that will literally intensify the impact of the game's sad story, because after each disturbing moment you'll go through, a weird feeling will come to your head and make you imagine the suffering that the real girl went through. You'll find out that Renee was pretty much mistreated in all ways, including being abused, humiliated, and even imprisoned in a locked room where she had to deal with the worst levels of loneliness and despair.
They put a straitjacket on you. They gave you a cold shower. They suffocated you with a sheet. They tied you to the bed.
And if you think that Renee was an isolated case, then you probably don't understand the point here. Because if you investigate the history of this place in real life, you'll realize that the 6,000 patients that the asylum received during its 90 years of operation were all subjected to the same inhumane behavior from the personnel there. They were basically captured like animals, and they even had to deal with electric shocks all the time. It appears that the asylum was more of an experimental lab than a hospital, where patients were used as test subjects for certain drugs and forms of torture. Especially when you know that the residents who lived near the institution used to call it the place of no return, because most patients never actually had the chance to go home, which means that the terrifying walls of that eerie clinic were the last thing that they saw.